Just a courtesy announcement that we are now live on the internet.
Good afternoon, President Chavez. Would you like to do a mic check?
Thank you, Dave.
We can hear you. Thanks. I'll make you a co-host.
Thank you.
Hi, Renee. Can we do a mic check, please?
Hi, this is Renee.
Hello. We can hear you. Thanks. Good afternoon, John. Would you like to do a mic check, please? You're muted. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
There we go. Now we can hear you. Thanks.
All right.
Hello, Paul. Would you like to do a mic check? Hello, Angela. Would you like to do a mic check, please?
Hey Dave, how's it going?
Doing well, thanks. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Doing okay. Ready for the next meeting. Hello, Gene. Would you like to do a mic check, please?
Yes, sir. Present.
We can hear you. Thanks. Hi, Deborah. Can we do a mic check, please?
Hello, good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon. Doing well, thank you. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Hi, Fran. Can we do a mic check, please?
Yes, thank you, Dave, very much.
Thank you. Hi, Miguel. Can we do a mic check, please?
Sure. How are you, Dave?
Doing well, thanks. How are you, sir?
Doing well, thanks. How are you, sir? Excellent. Thank you.
Good, thanks. Hello, Gary. Can we do a mic check, please?
How's that?
That's
Can you hear
better.
me?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Hello, Kova. Can we do a mic check, please?
Hello. Check,
Hello.
check.
We can hear you. Thanks. Hello, Supervisor Ellenberg. Can we do a mic check, please?
We sure can. How you doing, Dave?
I'm well. How are you?
Just dandy, thanks.
Thanks. John Mills, can we do a mic check with you, please?
Hey, Dave, can you hear me?
I can hear you, John. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you.
Hello, Martha. Can we do a mic check with you, please?
Hi, Dave.
Hello. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing well, thanks. Bob Minicucci, can we do a mic check, please?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Hello, James. Can we do a mic check, please?
Hello.
We can hear you. Thanks. Hello, George. Can we do a mic check, please?
Good afternoon.
We can hear you. Thanks. Hello, Imre. Can we do a mic check, please?
Mic check.
We can hear you. Thanks very much. Hello, Supervisor Wasserman.
There we go. Hello there, David.
How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm good. Is this still
Good.
Tuesday or is this Wednesday?
I don't know. They've all kind of blended together.
Oh, okay.
Okay, your
You have
mic check is all set.
Thanksgiving? Oh, no. That's
I think it's Christmas next week, right? We're close.
Christmas next week.
Good afternoon, Supervisor Simidian. Would you like to do a mic check, please?
Good afternoon, David. Hope you can hear me loud and clear.
We can hear you. Thank you. Didn't mean to cut you off,
Thank
Supervisor Wasserman.
No, that's fine. I was waiting for Supervisor Simidian to check his mics. I was waving at him.
Well, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to call our meeting to order. This is our budget hearing, our special meeting for the Board of Supervisors, November 18th, that we're kicking off. I'm going to say if there are any members of the public who would like to speak to an item that is not on the agenda, but within the purview of the Board of Supervisors, this would be the time to raise your hand. I'm going to ask the clerk if he can call roll. Then I'm going to ask Supervisor Wasserman if he can lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we will go to public comment.
Good afternoon, Supervisor Ellenberg.
I'm here.
Supervisor Simidian.
Simidian here.
Supervisor Cortezi.
Here.
Vice President Wasserman.
Here.
And President Chavez.
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I will now ask Supervisor Wasserman to lead us in the pledge. Please stand if you're able.
Thank you, Madam President. I pledge allegiance to the flag, of the United
States of America.
And
And to the republic
for which it
which
stands,
stands
one nation,
one nation,
nation,
under God,
God,
with
individual,
and justice for
liberty,
all.
and justice for all.
justice for all.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
We will now go to public comment, and we will give each speaker 2 minutes.
Our first speaker is Scott Largent. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak, and the timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good afternoon, everyone. Scott Largent. I think we might need to work on our Pledge of Allegiance. I think maybe we need a mic check on that. Back and forth. I don't know if maybe it's just a technical glitch or something, but the lips and the audio are not syncing today. I have court coming up next week, and I have just been hammering the DA's office. So they're adding more veteran prosecutors. I mean, this show is ridiculous, and you, Santa Clara County, are footing the bill for what Rosen pretty much not doing his job. I was able to subpoena out of the county counsel's office some information that was it was just wrong seeing this stuff. I, myself, and one other woman are the only people in Santa Clara County in the last 14 years that a charge has bounced from civil court into criminal court for a non-violent 166, which is with Scott using amplified sound devices. This other woman, and it's not Susan Bassey, because the stuff that's with her, she is committing felonies. She is doing stuff that that would make it a legitimate 166 to go through the Hall of Justice. Tanya McCash, she was a woman that went through a divorce, lived out of Willow Glen, business owner, you know, blah, blah, blah. We had a lot of similarities. We went into the same lobby at the San Jose Police Department to complain about our court orders and how we were being treated. And with her, they basically threw the cuffs on, they threw her in the Santa Clara County Jail, they put on there that she committed felonies. They just ran this woman through the ringer. It was horrible. And then Judge Manley got his claws in on her, threw her in jail for 40-something days, woman with no criminal record. What I'm getting at is you guys need to really start paying attention, because your public defender's office and your county counsel's office, they got some problems that they're going to have to deal with here pretty soon.
Our next speaker is Kirk Barton. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good afternoon, County Supervisors. Thank you so much for letting me speak today before your budget discussion. I wanted to, and I know this is not on the agenda yet, which is why I wanted to speak to it during public comment regarding the small business loan program that Supervisor Smitty and Supervisor Ellenberg introduced a couple weeks ago. I just wanted to continue as someone who is a local small business. I'm part of the Worker Owned Recovery California Coalition, the WORC Coalition, WRC Coalition, and we wholeheartedly support this program and hope that you will at least discuss it ancillarily today to support this going forward. I know Supervisor Ellenberg wanted to see something today or on the 20th on Friday, and it doesn't sound like the staff is quite there with the details, but I just wanted to kind of keep it top of mind that this is a really important program and it's a really visionary thing that the supervisors that you guys are trying to do and the county is trying to do for small business. And I would just really ask you to continue to support those efforts. And we included a support letter, our coalition included a support letter to make sure we could engage when appropriate or if available, just to offer services and to help guide anything that would help other small businesses, especially worker-owned cooperatives or other cooperative businesses or worker-owned businesses, to make sure the loan program can accommodate those small businesses and those financial structures and business structures that exist. So I do, good luck with your deliberations on your budget. I hope you do make space for this loan program going forward for the full $100 million as it goes forward. And I thank you very much and look forward to speaking to you in the future. Take care.
Our next speaker is Christina Diaz. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hello, my name is Christina Diaz. I have been a bilingual client service technician for 18 years. I am a mother of an autistic child trying to do distance learning. Right now, our communities are being destroyed by COVID-19. Thousands of Californians are dead because of political gridlock. It is obvious that community-focused services are more crucial than ever. Despite this, the county CEO believes laying off workers and adding to the mass of unemployed without health insurance is a good idea. This is not a good idea, especially because it will impact preventative services to our community during this pandemic. A good idea is listening to SEIU 521's budget proposal and balancing the budget in every way possible before even thinking of laying anyone off. I hope sincerely that the board listens to this. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Robert Aguirre. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Robert Aguirre. I want to talk about this lady, Rose, who lives outdoors, and she's originally from Campbell, And we've spoken about this lady in the past. She's now staying up near the county building, and she needs some help. The public defender's office is not providing her the kind of representation that she needs. She could have gotten out of the trouble that she's in a long time ago if somebody had actually filed a writ of habeas corpus on her behalf. And that problem continues to get worse, and she's now being diverted into Judge Manley's court. She doesn't have an addiction problem. She doesn't have any other kind of issues that would prevent her from just going through the normal channels. But I believe that because the county can make money off of her, that they continue to funnel her through these various programs to be able to bill her out and keeping her in limbo. And this is a woman that is dedicated her life to helping the unhoused. And rather than getting rewarded for her efforts, instead she's being punished by the system. And we have spoken, Scott Largent and myself have spoken about her in the past many times, and we just can't seem to get anybody to get off of the dime here and provide her with the kind of help that she really needs. So please look into that and provide her the kind of guidance and help that she really needs so she can get off of the streets and get back to helping people the way she intended. That's that. And also I want to thank Dave Cortese for his 12 years of service on the Board of Supervisors. And I wish him very good luck in the Senate seat. And I know that he's going to do a good job of filling those large shoes of Jim Bell. I look forward to working with him in the future, and I hope that somebody on the board can pick up where he left off.
Thank you. That concludes our speakers.
Thank you very much. We're now going to go to item 4, and this is to receive a report relating to information that was requested during these hearings. And I will have staff do an overview, and then I'll go to the board for comments or questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I wanted to do a little bit of an introduction to what's going on today. I think because of the unique process that we're doing this year and the fact that we're dealing with 2 fiscal years at the same time, there's been some confusion among the public, and I'd like to try to set it straight if I possibly can. Today and Friday are not technical budget hearings. They're not the mid-year budget readjustment. They're not the June budget adoption. These are recommendations for reductions which primarily involve preparing for the next fiscal year, which is fiscal year 21-22. Because as the board knows, back in last June when we were preparing for this fiscal year, that is 2021, we anticipated about a $300 million structural deficit. And we had lots of unknowns at the time. We still have unknowns, but some of the big unknowns at the time had to do with the state budget, which was in a $54 million deficit position, and all of the effects that that would have upon us. Also, there's a big question about ACA and funding for ACA and the 1115 waiver, which would have a big effect upon us. There was obviously the question about COVID and the CARES funding, whether it would be appropriate or enough for us, and how much all of the CARES response was going to cost. There were questions about what our property tax revenues were going to be because of the governor's executive order, which allowed people not to pay property taxes. So the best we could do was make a recommendation, a recommended budget to the board in June, which used a significant amount of one-time funding projections in order to balance the operational costs that we were projecting at that time. And the board agreed that we would not finalize that budget until August, which was done. And at that time in August, the budget projections were modified for this fiscal year, that is 2021, and the board approved the elimination of certain unfilled vacant positions, which changed our structural position significantly. But at that point, we had a recommended or a balanced budget. We still have a balanced budget. Our typical process in prior years, obviously, is that once we have a balanced budget every other week, the board takes actions that change the allocations, whatever those actions may be, and also actions happen in the operation of the organization that change the allocations. We have a typical mid-year realignment where we come back with new projections for revenue and expenditures, and the board then makes new allocations in order to true up the balance or the budget, that is to rebalance the budget. Again, that'll happen this year in February. It'll be dealing with the 2020-21 budget. But today, you're actually primarily dealing with the 21-22 budget. And the reason that we're recommending you do that is because we know that we're going to continue to have a major significant structural deficit. Many of the revenues that we used for the one-time balancing for this fiscal year will not be available next fiscal year. We also now have a better idea of the costs of COVID, although we don't have a clear idea of how long it's going to go on. We also still have question marks at the state level because of excess ERAF and because of Medi-Cal, and we have big question marks at the federal level. So when we come back in February with new projections, they will be somewhat better than they were in August, but not significantly, and there'll still be a lot of question marks in the works. So I wanted to clarify that to make sure that everybody realizes in the public that this is a reduction exercise designed to make some progress with balancing next year's budget, not balancing this year's budget. And there has been reference to the expenditures that the board would like to see made, that the board has acted upon in between August and today. Most notably, the desire for a $100 million business help program, but also another number of other issues that the board is very well aware of. All of those will be built into the February mid-year because we'll have new projections of revenue. And if we can't fit them into the mid-year, we will obviously have the board take action as they set priorities in the mid-year to find a way to fit them into the mid-year. But this is not the time to do that. This is really just a reduction model. What you're going to have before you today is, I should say, what we as staff are expecting from the board today is that after the 2 days of discussion and introduction last week, we want to get your input on the proposed reduction plan. And then we will come back on Friday with the salary ordinance needed to effectuate that. Again, it's just dealing with position reductions. The first part of the agenda that you have is our written responses to questions that the board asked. And I won't go through reading them, but we are ready for further questions if you have them. And then once the board gives us direction at the end of today's meeting, we will be appropriately recommending a salary ordinance on Friday. The summation of our recommendation for this rebalancing act is actually on the last page of the attachment 1, which summarizes the efforts and reductions that we're recommending. As we've talked about before, these reductions involve reorganization of the assessor's office, reorganization of TSS, some reorganization of FAF and SSA, and totals up to 132 vacant positions to be deleted, and another 38, or of that 132, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. 132 vacant positions, 38 filled positions. You can see from the chart in the last page, the savings on an ongoing basis, primarily you notice for 21-22 is about $28 million. There is some savings this year, but that's not the main focus of attention. The main focus of attention is for the 21-22. So with that, I ask for any questions regarding the responses we gave to the board on the agenda items that are listed.
Thank you. I'm going to go to first begin with item 4, and just for my colleagues, there were 1, 2, 3, 4. There were 5 supplemental reports, one that we received today that should be part of that section. And I'll see if there are any questions. I'll start with Dave and then go to Joe and Mike.
None for me at this time.
Thank you. Susan?
I have questions on 4A, D, and E. Do you want all of those at once?
Sure.
Okay. All right, thanks. So I'm going to start with A and just kind of some general overview questions. The budget discussions have been very focused on the structural deficit and reducing ongoing spending. Where we've had little information and where this came to a head for me yesterday, little information shared with the board on our immediate need to fund the COVID response. We received information yesterday during Keeley's report to the board, which we hadn't seen before and wasn't part of the packet, that indicated that our COVID spending is far higher than projected. And with the current surge, spending is likely to go up even more. We've evidently spent the reserve we set aside for COVID. So I would like, for my understanding and to confirm on the record, I want to recap what we had discussed in August and then ask for some clarity on the COVID expenditures. In the August budget hearings, additional detail was provided outlining $238 million in COVID-related expenses for FY 2021, of which $133 million would be new expenditures. In other words, not for volunteer tracers or existing budgeted county staff. I asked questions at that time about why we would not set this full amount of $133 million aside as a reserve rather than the $50 million proposed, and was assured that this amount would be sufficient to get us through November and that we would revisit spending at this time, of course, with hopes for federal relief. That support obviously has not materialized yet. Clearly, the demand has outstripped our planned resources. And again, referencing Key's report, it stated that we have apparently gone over our expected spending levels by $34.8 million just since August, for a total of $168 million. That's the 133 plus 34.8. This information had not been previously shared with the board or incorporated at all in this round of budget discussions. So my first question is, where is the money coming from to pay for these COVID costs right now? If, in other words, if we're paying the bills and the reserve is empty, where are we pulling from?
Thank you, Supervisor. And I hope you can hear me.
Sure.
Yep. Okay. Let me try to explain. In a typical budget year, As I mentioned, we approve a budget based on projections in June, and this time we also had projections in August. Those projections are based on what we know at the time. You're right that the projections we have incurred liabilities higher than the projections. Significant amount of what you're referring to in total numbers are encumbered expenditures, which mean they don't actually result in dollars going out the door. But what we've been doing is paying the costs with Object 2. And then what we do every year is we true up the budget in the mid-year by reallocating and re-estimating revenues. So every year we allocate, or the board allocates a number for Object 2, which includes service and supplies. And that amount of money over what we projected is being used, for cash. And we will true it up in February with the realignment. Also, I should point out that much of the costs that you're referring to, as you can see in the documentation, is from Object 1 costs. Now, these are costs that we budgeted already, or you budgeted already in August. What we did really is just reassign personnel to.
Right, that's why I was separating the new expenditures and not including those.
So you explained that very perfectly correct. So we will true that all up in the mid-year, and as we projected, we have enough cash and enough allocation to get us through November. We'll also have enough to get through December and January. We will true it up in February at the mid-year. If we get federal money, that will be part of the true up. Part of the true up will also have to be readjusting our whatchamacallit, excuse me, our expenditures in Object 1 are balanced, and then also we have some other reserves which are usable if we need to. So that'll all get trued up in February.
So let me be even a little bit more specific about the increased transparency that I want to see at the mid-year. You are, and your team is doing a relatively good job in showing us your efforts to close the structural deficit. But in order to really understand the COVID-related spending, I would like to see a much more detailed description of not only the spending, the expenditures, but what revenue sources are they tied to? I know that our initial, at least, coronavirus relief fund money, I think, is long gone, as is, I think, the state. What are we getting from provider relief funds, from CBDG, from FEMA, from any of the sources? I'm just trying to understand what money we're spending on COVID, how much we're spending. I want the board to be able to feel confident either that we are spending enough appropriately or not, but I don't feel, but I don't feel confident about that right now. And I want myself and my colleagues to be able to have options to address these compounding challenges and to have that conversation in a way we can't today.
Yeah, we will certainly spread everything out in the mid-year, and the list of funding sources that you gave is exactly correct. Some of it will be from COVID relief, some of it will be from FEMA, some of it will be from general fund. Hopefully some of it will be from a second relief bill, but the only other resource we have that can be used to to pay the debt is reserves and fund balance. So we're basically going to lay that all out for the board once we have a new projections of revenue. As I said, I think, well, definitely because of what the board did in August by reducing the number of vacant positions, our new revenue projections will have additional revenue saved because of that action, and that will also be incorporated into balancing the mid-year budget. So we've already taken some good steps to save about 120 million in August, and I hope that you'll take some additional steps on Friday. That will help us project a higher savings and have more opportunity to pay for COVID.
Right, and that other piece that you mentioned earlier in your comments about some of the money not actually being funds, cash that goes out the door, I want to see that that's included too. So when we're talking about expenditures, we have a very tangible understanding of what funds of those actually don't leave the county, and why we are accounting in different ways. So thank you for all of that. Just two other brief comments on item 4D. I just want to express appreciation for coming back with this recommendation, since Supervisor Lee will have taken office by then. Having a board discussion on December 15th will include all of our new board's voices. So thank you for that. And on 4E, we got a request, received this request for a deferral, and I will grant it, but I would like to get a status report prior to the December date, which I guess means next week or so, outlining the administration's progress so far. And what I'm looking to see in that report are potential funding partners and the status of any discussions, the likely size of the funding pool, the likely eligibility requirements for borrowers, a likely fiduciary agent to receive applications and facilitate funding, and to the extent you can, a best case and worst case starting date for filing a loan for members of the public to be able to start filing applications for these. These are the low interest, small local business loans.
Yes, I can give you a little bit of information about that today, but we certainly will give you more information off agenda. The county council has a off agenda coming to you about the legal issues related to this. We are in the process of finalizing a large transmittal for the board to consider about various options that you just addressed, what other counties are doing, how they fund it, what are our particular proposals. When we do come back to the board in December, we will need the board to make some policy decisions because there, as you know, and your office knows because of all the research you've done yourself, there are a panoply of different options that could be taken, and the board will have to give us direction about how they would like to go. We will certainly have a recommendation from staff, but there are many options the board could take.
Great, and if the extension allows more time to really come back with some very well fleshed out options so that we can hopefully take some positive action at that December 8th meeting and really get this rolling. I mean, clearly time is of the essence for thousands of our community members who are just really struggling. We heard a lot of that yesterday as well. So
yeah, the current draft is an 8-page transmittal with 32-page amendments, giving all the different data about what could be done. So we're trying to be as thorough as possible.
I really appreciate that, and I'll look forward to the off agenda that will perhaps tide me over with some patience until December 8th. And I think that is all I have on item 4. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I apologize to my colleagues. I want to get to all of you, but I would like to take the public speaker. I intended to do that after each presentation. So if I could do that, and then I'll go to Supervisor Simidian.
Our next speaker is Melissa Willett. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you. Good afternoon, board. My name is Melissa Willett. I worked for county for 8 years. I'm proudly the first vice president of SEIU Local 521. And I want to say first that it's really disappointing that the members of the public today, including myself, are being required to speak on these items, and the board has to then vote on this information that's not been made available to the public before the meeting. I implore the county to be transparent with the public and the community around the relevant details of the budget and the changes that happen. I know everyone is in unprecedented times, but it's difficult for the community to engage in the budget conversations without relevant information. Especially during these unprecedented times and really scary times, we have to be prudent and make decisions only when information and data is provided, reviewed, and a thoughtful decision can be made. With access to information, we have that difficulty. So regarding the executive's recommended fiscal year November cost reductions, proposed changes, we must exhaust all alternatives to cuts to vital services for our community, and layoffs must be the last resort to balance the budget. We have to avoid any harm that this proposed budget will have on communities most impacted by inequities, including residents who rely on our services and 521 workforce, which are primarily low wage. We cannot balance the budget on frontline workers again, and we must learn from the actions taken during the last recession. We know these budget reductions have not been adequately analyzed to determine the impact of BIPOC communities, both essential workers and the public. And we must address racial inequity through full and equitable funding of services to ensure enough resources for all services that are essential to our communities, and through fair and adequate compensation of essential workers whose ethnic diversity parallels that of the communities we serve. So I'm really asking you please delay the vote on the budget to next year. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our speakers.
Thank you. Thanks to my colleagues for letting me do that. I'm going to go to Supervisor Simidian.
Thank you, Madam President. And I just on the issue of the loan program, I know that staff is trying to consider the input from all 5 members of the board, but as a proponent of the loan program, I just want to say I understand the sense of urgency, but I also think it's important to take the time to get this right. And I know that's consistent with what Supervisor Ellenberg was suggesting as well, but I'm focusing a little bit more on the fact that if it really is a loan program, that means that funds have to be returned, which is one of the ways we can afford to do more. Funds will only be returned if we have a careful underwriting and servicing plan in place. I think our ability to perhaps find other partners and put together a good program will be enhanced by taking the time to get it right. And regrettably, I think we know pretty clearly that the pandemic is going to be with us for a while. So I want the administration to hear the range of views on our board on this subject of timeline, and I just wanted to add that to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go then to Supervisor Wasserman. Did you have any comments or questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've just got comments when we're at the end. That's more of a summary than specific.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other comments, Supervisor Cortese, did you have another comment on this item?
Yeah, I'm not sure where, or because my notes are a little bit disaggregated, if I'm in the right place or not to inquire about VMC hospital and clinics. I know I've got notes about vacant positions. I don't know if that's just vacant positions being eliminated, if that's under the section we're at now, or if that's later in the presentation today.
It'll be the next section. I'll come right back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to go through my questions. I will say to my colleagues, I really appreciate Dr. Smith clarifying that the intent of this this series of special meetings was really around reduction. And to be frank with you, I didn't understand that, which is partly why I know myself and Supervisor Ellenberg and others moved initiatives or discussions to this set of hearings. So I want to just acknowledge that this process has been a little bit confusing to me, and so I do understand why it's a little bit confusing to the public. The second thing is I wanted to thank the staff for the information, and I'll start with Mr. Mills' November budget reduction workshop referral timeline. I really appreciated getting the information, and there were a couple of pieces of information that I wanted to clarify because I found them a bit at odds with previous information that we've received. The first question is that as part of the report back, there is a line that talks about the voluntary separation incentive program timeline. And it says that vacant positions resulting from the VSIP program or VSIP provide the county with additional flexibility in terms of either creating vacancies that can be deleted to realize ongoing savings in 2022, or that can provide alternatives for employees impacted by layoff. So my question is, how my understanding was that for the most part, the program was intended to have people vacate positions that would stay, that would actually be eliminated. So given that, how many of these positions do we anticipate, or based on what we've seen thus far, do we anticipate would be available for folks who are in the layoff category to be bumped into a new position?
That's probably a best question I can better answer. I think the write-up from ESA was to try to give a concept of all the policy decisions that could be made by the board. What you're asking really is a policy recommendation that the administration might make to the board, realizing that the board can do other things they want. But from an administrative perspective, our intent is to recommend to the board, once these are vacated by voluntary separations, that virtually all of them be deleted, because that's the only way that you can significantly save money on the Object 1 expenditures for the next fiscal year. Again, the VSIP is really focused more on fiscal year 21, 22 and beyond, rather than fiscal year 2021, because the money that will be generated in order to give the payout will come from the currently allocated salary for that particular individual through the end of this fiscal year. But to get back to your question, we will have to come to the board with every recommendation for deletion, and we'll have reasons why we recommend any positions not to be deleted. There may be a few that are applied for that are absolutely critical to remain, but I've communicated with my department heads that they should plan on not having those positions available. They're working on a process right now of reworking all of their procedures and processes to be more efficient, more effective. The question about how VSIP interacts with the recommended layoffs that you'll face on Friday is a great question. Essentially, well, every one of the individuals that face layoff on Friday, and we can't really name them right now because there's so many bumping procedures and processes that, you know, all we can say is that a position of that type will be eliminated. Who ends up being the person that's actually laid off is another question. But any of those people who are affected during that process will be able to avail themselves of the voluntary separation by noticing the county before the 1st of December that they're going to avail themselves of that. And then they'll be able to maintain their employment until March 7th, or if they wish to leave earlier, they can leave earlier and get the payout at that time. I think I answered all your questions.
So let me go back, and I'm going to just break them down by question. I won't knit any of them together. Initially, when the board was engaged on the voluntary separation incentive program, it was made clear to me by you that if a position accepted the voluntary, participated in the voluntary program, if they were allowed to participate in the program, it was because in fact the job that person was in could in fact be closed. And that was the reason there was savings, is because that position would be deleted and there would then be ongoing savings. And I understand the point you've raised about this being a 2022 investment, for, a savings. But
yes, that's still true. We intend administratively to delete all the positions. I was just trying to say that the board has the discretion not to delete a position. And if there's a position that we think really needs to be retained, we can certainly talk to the board about that. But all of them will come before the board for deletion.
so then what it says in this is that employees who are laid off could access those vacant positions, but that's not accurate based on what you just said.
It's technically legally accurate. We aren't going to recommend that to the board. We're going to recommend that we vacate the position. And that's why I was saying, I think the ESA report was to give you a full idea of what is possible, but those will not be recommendations that we make.
So then for the number of filled positions that you're recommending, the options that they have as described here really are much more limited, because for the most part, this is actually not an option that you're going to recommend to the board based on what you just said. Because what you just said is that all of these positions would be deleted, that you would be recommending that they would be deleted once they're vacated.
Right. Okay. And the incumbent in the position, before it'll get deleted in March. The incumbent in the position would have the option right now to apply for the VSIP and take advantage of that. Or they also have the option to do bumping in a typical manner, or they have the option to do emplacement, or they have the option to move to another position with a quote voluntary demotion. So they don't give up their current rights in the intervening time period between now and March 7th. But once March 7th comes around, those positions will be recommended to the board to be deleted.
Thank you. That's helpful. And then the other question I asked, and perhaps you could give us an update, is do you know approximately how many people have taken advantage of the program already, the VSIP?
So far, it's in the 300 plus range of various classifications. You've asked me before what I would hope for. I would hope around 500, but of course it's voluntary, so it depends on people's desire to separate. But that's where we stand at this point.
Thank you. The next is the budget general fund risks. I wanted to thank Mr. Lorenz for the report. I think there were the challenges. This was part of the request. The what I had actually asked for was to get an analysis of the assumptions that were used to project the ongoing budget deficit. And what is challenging about this is it's a really good, robust list of impacts, but without the corresponding implications or the range of risk. And that's both for on the general fund investment. And by the way, I like the word investment, the general fund investments. First time I've seen it without the word subsidy. I like it. But there's no analysis attached to it. And I was asking this for the general budget recommendations that were leading us down the path of recommendations that you were making both in this reduction round and also how it lays the foundation for what we're going to be discussing in the near future. And I was just saying that because it wasn't the information I requested, and it's difficult to make it, at least for myself, to make an assessment of not just the hole we're filling, but the range of risk that we're having. But I wanted to say at least that I appreciated the robust list.
Sounds like we need to take another try at it to get as much information as you would request. Maybe I'll ask Paul to work with your office to make sure we address all the questions.
Yeah, and it's really more broad, Dr. Smith. The examples I was using, and they're hard, I recognize this, but what I wanted the board to have access to was the framework that your staff was using relative to assumptions, so that we were understanding and seeing the lens the way that you were outlining it. That was my goal. But we're happy to continue to work with your team on that. I'm going to move. Oh, I apologize.
No, I was just going to say, it sounds like we should come back with an off agenda to give you more details. We certainly have all of that. We'll make sure we get it all written down and back to the entire board.
Yeah, and it
President,
value. I apologize, Greg. Go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, we are working on that. That was a request that we had before. We were getting some of this information quantified from VMC this week. We are doing similar work with the general fund. And so it is an active response being built right now. And we'll get that out off agenda once we have it all compiled.
I appreciate that, Greg. And the thing is that if we're going to do the priority setting on the 15th of December, it might be a benefit to the board to have it prior to that. Thank you. On the Child Advocacy Center, I don't know if these are for Paul or Dr. Smith. And what I wanted to just make sure I understood is that the level of medical staffing for the operation as it kicks off, I just wanted to better understand the thinking behind the staffing level as we kick off the new Child Advocacy Center.
Yeah, Paul will have to answer that. Paul? Where'd you go, Paul?
Oh, he may not be here.
He was there a while ago.
Yeah, I did. I saw him too. I saw him earlier. Well, I can come back to that if he's able to rejoin us. And really, I'll just say that I wanted to also get an update on where we were with the recruitment process, and then making sure we had enough codes for that section. But we can get those questions to him. And then the other thing that what other item? I think those were, I do have just one more question, which is it's much broader, and Greg, I don't know if this is better for you or Dr. Smith, but I think it's really important that the information that you've given us about what's one time versus ongoing, and I just want to reference back what Supervisor Ellenberg asked about the sources of funds, that when we have the budget discussion in the February timeframe, better understanding the, what's being held up with one-time funds versus what are ongoing funds, and then ongoing savings versus one time. And I know that you all have outlined that for us before, but the reason I wanted to reinforce it is that as we're thinking about, significant shifts in our budget, and as an example, I want to just reinforce that the $100 million investment in small businesses, I was very interested in supporting it because I was interested in supporting understanding the options. I'm not sure that I understand that we have enough room in the budget to do a $100 million program, particularly given the timing that we will or won't get money from the federal government. So one of the reasons I'm really interested in what's one time versus what's ongoing is better understanding how it aligns with the recommendations that come back to the board relative to this business loan fund. So I wanted to say that more because I just wanted to make sure that part of the reason I was interested in options is I wanted to make sure that the board had the flexibility available to it to evaluate whatever options come before the board.
Yes, Madam President, this year, the mid-year will be a lot more detailed to answer many of these questions and a lot more, because there is, in a typical year, really sort of minor technical readjustments. This year is going to be lots of major readjustments and lots of explanation about what's one time, what's not one time, and where we've recommended allocations. So we'll definitely do that.
And the last point I wanted to raise, and this is something that I think would also be really helpful, is that I can't emphasize enough what I'm about to say, because based on the feedback I'm giving you, it's going to sound like it'll sound like a little split here, but the work that you all have done, that the EOC has done in particular to be responsive to what is our highest obligation, which is making sure that people in our community are healthy and safe, has been, I think, really remarkable. I think one of the challenges with the EOC is that there's a lot of work being done out of the EOC and a lot of expenditures being made that it is very difficult to align with the budget. I found I was also challenged with Key's presentation yesterday. I thought, I recognize this was the opportunity to be as transparent as we can. So I know you're giving information that in some ways is by its very nature going to be imperfect. But I raise this because I think what will be important in February is having the county's budget with a very detailed pullout of what we're spending relative to COVID-19 and other emergencies that are coming out around that emergency. Because for example, I don't think this was a problem for us in this way, but if we'd had a significant impact to our overall services because of the fire, that would have been, that would have been another significant pullout. Because I think what is going to be important for the public to understand and for the board to understand is the commitment and the investment we've already made in COVID-19 I think is a very important story, because I think one of the challenges is that many people in our community who are seeing things close down are looking at the county as not just causing hardship, but primarily taking. And the fact is that we've been taking actions. I think Dr. Cody's been taking actions that she thinks are right for public health. And we've also been making expenditures out of our Commonwealth as a community to protect the health and welfare of the community. So we have taken actions like $7 million for internet and another $5 million for rent relief, for the actions those actions are dwarfed really by the investments that we've made in protecting the community. So a recommendation that I think would help the public understand the work you're doing much better.
Yeah, President Chavez, if I may, I think both of those points are extremely interrelated. Having a presentation at mid-year that describes ongoing costs and ongoing revenues, separating that from one-time costs and one-time revenues, as you alluded, ties very much to the status at that time of our response costs to the pandemic and any additional one-time funding assistance from the federal government we may get. It's possible at mid-year we'll have to describe not only an ongoing deficit, but perhaps a one-time deficit challenge in addition to that if we don't get additional federal funding. So I think they're both very related. I think that you're picking up on that and prompting us to share that with everyone else, how interrelated those are and how important it is going to be for us to pull all that together in one broad picture for that mid-year adjustment.
Thank you. The other thing too, as it relates to the hospital, and I again want to say, I don't use the word subsidy. I like that we use the word investment. I think it's actually a bargain for what how the community benefits from the hospital. But one recommendation I would make is that we also have to better understand where we are in the purchase and operation of those facilities, because so much of this is still relatively new to the county family. And so I'm still very interested in understanding if COVID-19 hadn't happened, we've made a significant investment in maintaining the health of that hospital, and we're bringing on these new hospitals. I also want to make sure that, again, the board and the public has a better understanding of where we are in the purchase, and I'm going to use the wrong term, but like purchase recovery, right? Like we made these purchases, and when do they start to be not entirely revenue neutral, because that's not what they will be, but close to what we think is revenue neutral relative to the county's overall health program.
Right.
So
we'll definitely do that. As the board knows, when we were recommending purchasing the hospitals, we had a pro forma, which was basically presuming relatively status quo, and then COVID hit, which was far from status quo. So I think it's only reasonable, as you asked, for us to have a reassessment of that pro forma based on the changes in the medical landscape. We'll do that.
thank you. And I will, just to be candid, I think we had changes prior to that because we recognized that there were a lot of and still a lot of investments we need to make in those facilities. And I think that's fine. I just think we need to be able to explain that. So again, that we're looking at the curve of the business over not 1, 2, or even 5 years, but over what the 10-year period is and what investments we needed to make to bring those online in a healthy way. And,
right.
Thank you. All right, so those are all my questions. We'll now go to item 5. There's no action to take on item 4.
I think, Greg, I'll show this and you can chime in if you have other comments. The board has seen this before. This is another repeat of what you've already talked about in the 2 previous workshops. This is a summary of the actions that we will be asking you to take on Friday, unless you tell us you want us to modify them at this point. I'd like to maybe start at the bottom line, number 16, which is child support services. In the written description in the memo, you can go through it in detail, but in summary, child support services really has no effect on the general fund. However, because it is funded exclusively by state funds, there is a strong pattern that the state does not ever increase the revenue for each county DCSS. So essentially our local departments have to figure out a way to deal with increasing expenditures. And Ignacio believes that next year there will be decreasing need and increasing costs. So he's recommending deleting 2 vacant positions and 1 filled position. we've checked with the state, and the incumbents in these positions will be able to take advantage of the voluntary separation with funding from state funding if they so desire. I don't know if Ignacio wants to add anything else to this discussion, but jump in if you do.
Thanks, Jeff. Just to mention that one fill position will be vacant. If it isn't already, it may have already vacated. So it's actually a deletion of 3 vacant positions. And we're using some one-time federal matching dollars to augment our budget reduction for current year. And we're anticipating that we do have staff that will take advantage of the voluntary incentive program. And if that were to occur, then obviously we'd be reviewing more positions for deletion, but those would be vacant positions, obviously not filled.
Then going up, I don't know why I'm doing this backwards, but it's easier to explain. TSS has recommended 29 positions, 19 of which are vacant. Of the 10 that are listed as filled, there are some changes going on right now, but I can't give you exact numbers because people are taking advantage of voluntary separation, and also people have moved into other positions. But at this point, it looks like it'll be 10 positions. The reason for this is the board will remember we went through a long 1.5, 2-year process of ITCC, which was a revamp of our entire IT system, it was essentially a huge reclassification program where we created classifications that were more modern, that were more in tune with what actual needs were occurring, that had different pay scales, different minimum qualifications. And as part of that, there was a creation of a different infrastructure that was called a federated infrastructure, so that the IT functions in the entire county were led by central TSS, but some of the departments, particularly large departments, had embedded within the department IT specialists who had particular expertise in the particular systems that they were utilizing. It was a good result, and we ended up with essentially everybody getting a raise and getting put into positions that are more appropriate for their skill set and what they're actually doing. However, we do have vacant positions in administrative and management functions at this point, and the decision that we're recommending to the board is that at a time period of great financial stress, we can accomplish the IT projects without those administrative positions, and we're recommending the deletion of those. Then going up to VMC, there are 48.5 vacant positions and 1 in VMC and 1 COVID testing vacancy. All of these are vacant positions. As the board knows, probably the public doesn't know, our enterprise fund is the largest department we have, with well over 5,000 employees. And we do have a large number of vacant positions. This cut in positions will not affect direct services, will probably have an effect on the ability to expand services, but at this point, the services that are being focused on are not the ones that are directly related to COVID, except that 1 testing position, which we actually are going to reclassify into a different position to do more complex work in public health rather than in VMC. SSA sections 8 or numbers 8 through 11. Also reorganization. SSA is challenging because they have many different funding sources, some with state funding, some matching funding, some grant funding, some general fund. I can leave this to Bob Minicochi to tell you the effects that this will have. Bob?
So good afternoon. Thank you. So this is broken out by each of the categories of our business areas. So you can see there. I'll continue in the flow from going from the bottom up, since that's what we're doing. Based on what you see here, we have in the employment benefits side, there's 11 vacant positions that we are proposing for elimination. Largely, again, they're vacant. Largely, they were on the employment benefits side, on the employment services side, and many of those were support positions, management analyst positions, and then I know the question had come up before relating to the intern and earn positions. And what we had there was essentially, this isn't a reduction to the program, it's really just a change to how we do the staffing. We had a number of unclassified positions. Folks might have initially been put in there to support the program, but eventually then have rolled into permanent positions. So the staffing to support that program remains in place. It's just the type of position that we're eliminating that was an interim position on the unclassified side. In the Department of Family and Children's Services, there are a handful of positions that we are looking at, again, all vacant positions and basically all support positions, some office specialists positions, a legal clerk, office, data office specialist, things like that. Again, trying to minimize the impact to direct service. On the, sorry, technology here's not cooperating. On the, apologies, my just lost my screen here.
Family and Children's Services.
Yeah, it's like it's screen just weird. So moving on then to the Department of Adult and Aging Services, we have a handful of positions, a couple on the IHSS side, vacant positions, and a couple positions on the PAGC side, largely support positions and a direct service position. What we mentioned before on the agency office side, smallest office, but largest hit. And again, what we're trying to do is take reductions on the back office support side. We have 12 positions there. About 5 of those are filled. Some of those are just recent fills, and we'll just be curtailing some of that service. Again, what we're looking at here is some accounting positions, a couple of office specialist positions, and a fraud investigator position, and things in positions along those sides. So again, the overall arching principle here was to not have impacts on the direct service side, and also for the most part, as you can see, only out of the 39 positions that we were proposing, only about 6 or 7 of those are actually filled positions.
Okay, so that takes us to procurement, planning and finance agency, small numbers of vacant positions, which the board can ask the department heads about if they would like. I'd like to go up to our facilities or fleets and facilities, 13 vacant positions. We had concerns about cutting FAF too much because of the many projects that we have going and the new properties that we've attained, but we think that 13 vacant positions should not delay those projects or delay those services significantly. We probably will in the mid-year or in the prep for next year's budget, have some recommended changes in our 5-year capital improvement plan, because we just don't think that we can continue with all the relatively minor, and not unimportant, but relatively minor projects that have been embarked upon. So we think this will be a match for those projects. Jeff Draper, did you want to add anything?
Jeff, are you on?
I guess not.
Okay, I guess it's the other Jeff.
Okay. SEPA also 6 positions. Joe, do you have the opportunity to tell us about those?
Yes, Joe Zintek, Director of the Consumer and Environmental Protection Agency. 4 of those are in our vacancies in our Agriculture Weights and Measures unit, and we're working with ESA to modernize that classification so we can gain some efficiencies. The seasonality of the ag work can help backfill for the weights and measures work, and that study is well underway. We have the one filled position is an animal control officer, and we have a way to accommodate them. We're holding positions to potentially to be able to accommodate that position, so it won't be a layoff. And then we're also our clean water program, and we're working on ways to streamline some of our permitting for the county's stormwater permit to be more efficient and accommodate that vacancy.
Then the CEO's office, total of 13 positions, 5 of which are vacant. With regard to the filled positions, we're making a recommendation that's an unpleasant one, but I think necessary to change the way that we do our lobbying in Sacramento. We're unique in the county and the state as having a county employees doing our lobbying, which is a process that occurred many years ago when a generalist was employed to lobby the legislature about particular issues. However, as everyone knows, and certainly Senator-elect Cortese is aware, current legislative efforts are very specialized, and oftentimes lobbying teams specialize in particular fields because the complexity of the legislation. Over the years, we've hired contracts to be able to fill those needs. We think we can continue to do that. And although we've had years of service from our current lobbyist, we think that it's reasonable to reduce those positions. The other positions that are being talked about are administrative and some management positions. And as I mentioned, 5 of them are vacant. That takes us to the assessor's reorganization, which the assessor explained to the board at the prior workshop, and I won't try to explain. I don't know if Larry is on the phone to give further discussion or answer further questions.
Yes, I'm here, and I just urge approval of the county executives and the budget director's recommendation to accept the assessor's reorganization plan, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you.
So with that, I think we'll wait for questions.
Thank you very much. And I'll see if there's, I can't remember if we took public comment on this already, but I don't have any. So I'll see if there are any comments or questions from my colleagues. Any additional comments or questions? I don't see any. Actually, I'm sorry, we do have one public speaker. If I could ask the clerk to call on our public speaker.
Our next speaker is Zeb Feldman. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak, and the timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors. Zeb Feldman from SEMA Operating Engineers, Local 3. I just wanted to comment on the budget cuts that are proposed and the ensuing layoffs. While I realize that there will be space for SEMA individuals and individuals in general that are being proposed for deletion to land, it does concern me about the operational impacts, specifically to intergovernmental affairs, which you've received, everybody on the board has received a white paper from SEMA concerning this. I would urge you to not cut that particular department from the CEO's unit, from the CEO's office. And of course, we've raised some concerns about the reorg at the assessor's office that will also be impacting individual SEMA members. The cuts that have been proposed for TSS, while generally SEMA opposes, we also understand the need to reorganize various areas within the county and understand that we can't oppose every cut that comes. So please just consider that and pay special attention to the areas that I mentioned. I appreciate your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Zeb. I have no other public speakers. I'm going to go back to my colleagues for discussion and action. And so let me just say what is before us now. This is item 5, and this would be, there are 2 recommended actions. One is to approve the executive's recommended cost reductions at item A, and B is to refer this item to November 20th for approval of resulting salary ordinance. I see no hands up, so I'm going to ask if there's a motion. Supervisor Wasserman?
Thank you. I was doing the raise hand on the electronic and it didn't quite get there fast enough. I'm happy to make the motion for the approval of both. And then if and when I get a second, I want to make some comments directed through you, please, to Dr. Smith.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second it.
And a second from Supervisor Ellenberg. All right, we have a motion and a second. Go ahead, Supervisor Wasserman.
Thank you. Dr. Smith, on your very last page, which you started your presentation with and worked backwards, which I think was a good way to go. I see the 28 million in the fiscal year 21-22. I see the budgets for shortfalls in 2021 and 21-22. And Dr. Smith, long story short, I don't see how we're at this rate, how we're going to address the projected deficit that we have. It kind of feels like the boy with the fingers in the dike, given the projections that we have. Now, granted, if the federal government reimburses all of our COVID costs, that'd be great. Granted, if ERAF continues, that would be great. Granted, if a federal stimulus, first one or second one or whatever's coming, somewhere between 500 billion and 2.5 trillion, include monies for counties specifically, that would be great. If it's a stimulus for the businesses and they pay more wages and people pay more income tax and they buy more things and pay more sales tax, and that goes to the federal and state government and they pass it on down to us, that would be great. But as a professional planner for a long time, it's you know, you kind of want to plan for the worst, hope for the best. I remember 9 years ago when the shortfalls weren't this big, even during the financial, what do we call it, the Great Recession. Agreed, they were financial back then, they're medical now, but the medical emergency, the pandemic, has become a recession. And in our particular line of work, we're the ones who the burden, the onus, whatever you want to call it, for those most affected by this pandemic and by this recession rely on. We're talking about being the Bank of Santa Clara County and making loans to people. We're talking about relieving this, relieving that. The state's done the same as far as non-payments of rents. I don't think a third of those people will ever make things whole. And I understand the burden is on us. I'm seeing that burden in a lot of ways, Dr. Smith, and I'll conclude with this, and then through the chair, I'd love to hear your response about our piecemeal approach to what I think is a bigger project that probably needs a bigger solution. We met for 13 hours yesterday. An hour before this meeting started, I got an email from you with the details on supplements, if you will, 4A, 4B, 4C, 4D, an hour before the meeting. I received 167 emails after our board meeting last night and had gone through about 60 of them this morning prior to chairing South County United Task Force. And so when Supervisor Ellenberg was raising the questions about 4A and B and C, or I missed a letter there, Susan, I'm scrambling around asking my staff, what is she referring to? Because I was 100-some emails from getting to the email that you sent out 1 hour before the board meeting. And you sent it out 1 hour before the board meeting because you were in a 13-hour board meeting last night. And I know some members that were there were in your EOC afterwards. So I'm a little concerned about two things. One, that we're not doing enough at this time to get ahead of where we are and what our Dr. Cody told us is going to be a rough 60 days. And number two, I'm very concerned about at the rate we're doing meetings and the length we're doing meetings and the issues we're raising and the referrals we're dealing with, I'm afraid you're no longer able to keep up. I don't think it's humanly possible for you and your staff and James and the others to keep up with the demand. I know you've been at it for 8 months, but things are tougher now, throwing in this budget and the frequency of meetings. And I'd like to hear back, please, Dr. Smith, one, about your staff's ability to respond to things and make up reports and get them to the board far sooner than 1 hour before the meeting starts and still have sanity and a life and a professionalism, a completeness in what you respond to us. That's one. And two is your concerns or fears or Greg's that the pace in which we're addressing financial needs is sufficient, or shouldn't we pick up the pace now? Thank you, Madam President.
Well, Supervisor, I think I'll try to answer the pace issue first. Administratively, we spent and continue to spend a lot of time trying to decide how fast we think we should push and what we think in terms of the future. And as we all know, this year has been particularly challenging to predict because of all of the different unexpected eventualities. That's a euphemism for disasters. I think that we are taking a prudent approach. If we moved faster, it would be more layoffs. That's obviously its own disaster. So I think it's a matter of us balancing the needs of our clients and the likelihood of generating new revenue from the state and the feds and whatever recovery there is going to be from the economy. A more conservative county executive might be recommending cutting hundreds, if not thousands, of positions at this point. But I think that that's probably using a meat cleaver when it's probably better to use a scalpel at this point. Sorry to use that analogy. That's what I spent most of my life doing. You know, we care about our employees. We care about our constituents. We want to make sure we do as little damage as possible, but we also want to make sure that the budget adds up and that we can continue. So it's a judgment call. The board obviously has the final decision-making about the issue. If you want us to move faster, we'll move faster, but I can say I honestly think this is a prudent speed and that we have tools to get us through the needs that we have.
Great.
In terms of all the moving pieces and everything, you know, staff is, you know, quite close to the end of their rope, but they're all hanging on with the last claw that they have, and we'll be there. We'll make the system work. We'll be successful.
Thank you. Through the chair, if I may.
Please.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. I hope what you're doing. I needed to ask the question. I know back in the Great Recession, there were percentage cuts rather than layoffs. I know you're considering all types of different things and working with our labor forces to find ways. I think you were very creative in this time approaching and attacking the vacant funded positions and then doing the voluntary retirement, if you will. I think Supervisor Chavez's point about if we're giving somebody a golden parachute, so to speak, not replacing that position is what makes sense. Because if you replace it, then what have you really done? So I think the approach you've taken is excellent. I needed to ask the question to find out if you really had confidence in what you were doing now or were more worried but not expressing it. I thought the latter. I'm glad to hear the former. I will tell you, my next door neighbor, his son is on a basketball team at the high school, 10 players, 8 of them got COVID. And that was last week. And when I think about all of you at the Emergency Operations Center, I think about that EOC team. And I think of how often you and Dr. Cody and Greta and James and Brian and Miguel and all the other people, the 200 other people that spend time there, and how any one of you could be asymptomatic, and how you are the team that is literally managing all the services happening, the testing, the tracing, the PPE, the hospital beds, the following up on complaints that you get, all this stuff that's going on. You have an enormous team doing an enormous task that 9 months ago, none of them was doing any of this. And at the same time as doing what you're doing now, you're also doing all the other stuff you were doing 9 months ago. And you are not doing that by adding 2,000 employees. So I know how thinly stretched you are. And my concern is that Team EOC, for instance, is a team in which on any given day, 8 out of 10 players could catch COVID and you'd be laid up in quarantine. And I'm not convinced that we have the people behind you that can fill in the same in your shoes. So we really need to continue doing all we can as soon as we can, because 7/8 of our budget is not in our control. And I, for one, am sick and tired of counting on the state or the federal government to bail us out. Thank you very much for allowing me this time, Madam President.
You bet, Mike. Supervisor Cortese?
Thank you, President Chavez. So I'm actually having a little bit of a different moment about all this in terms of timing. Part of it is because here we are in the middle of November, almost the third week of November, and we're just a couple weeks away from property tax installments coming in, which is, not only a huge indicator, but, the real lifeblood of the organization, I think, in terms of base revenue, general fund revenue. And, you don't really have to wait until you see what comes in, because we know that we're not experiencing the kind of reassessment volume or trauma that we saw, if you will, in the Great Recession, because property values have held up so far. And it remains to be seen if they will or not, in large part based on how we and the federal government respond to landlord-tenant issues, and to fundamental concerns that the right stimulus package and the right surgical approach, Dr. Smith, from the federal government could actually, save the day largely in terms of that side, the revenue side of our operation. But my point is, we're not, kicking the can down the road on making decisions on layoffs for 6 months or a year. When you're facing structural deficit issues, certainly would be unhealthy by my book. But taking a look at where we are, I mean, I think for one, 6 months ago when we were approaching our typical, July 1 fiscal year, thought that not only was the car going to go off the cliff, which it pretty much has, but that we would be facing dramatically plummeting real estate values right now. We went through that once. There was really nothing to indicate otherwise. And why would they stay up, all things being equal? And I do think there has been some response that has been healthy and has kept that from happening up till now, including our own response, moratoriums on evictions and some of the things we've been able to do so far, to keep that issue from becoming a big problem. So that's one thing. I combine that with the inquiry that Supervisor Chavez made about the revised pro forma, revised structural deficit implications brought about by the hospital acquisitions. And we don't have that information. I very much appreciated, Dr. Smith, your response of, yes, we need to do that. Yes, we need to get that to you. But a lot of these, and rightfully so, a lot of these, we can get you that information seem to be, that's not something we can hit the pause button and recess for 30 minutes and come back and have. These are going to probably be January reports that are coming back on those issues. And just for example, assuming if we just put a fair assumption out there, which I think you've sort of owned up to or indicated already, sunshined already, Dr. Smith, that there is and will be a significant differential between what we thought the hospital acquisitions would produce or net out in terms of short-term structural deficit versus reality, and in part because of COVID. So why wait to see that information? Well, because I think the way you handle that information is not necessarily with layoffs. The county should still be in a position to at least consider flattening the cost of any structural deficit caused by that hospital acquisition long-term by amortizing it out rather than trying to take a beating or have our employees take a beating short-term, over a 6 to 12 to 18-month cycle. I don't know if that's prudent. I don't think any of us would know today that that's prudent. So I almost feel in the situation of, the school districts in the public school system always get into this situation because of statute, state statute, where, there's a proposed state budget. Everyone on this panel, everybody here is familiar with this drill, right? And in March, they have to make decisions about laying people off, putting layoff notices out, even though they know that the governor's revise isn't going to be out until May 15th, and the final budget won't be out until after that. And there's at least some, there's some fluidity there. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's state budget committees. There's things going on that could change their budget, not only their budget assumptions, but just the way they try to flatten out their budget costs or any structural or deficit issues that they have. And so we see this little cycle where people get laid off, people get or they get notices, they get hurt, they have to go, they feel like they have to go find other jobs, or they get fed up and just move to another industry. And 2 months later, everybody's wondering, how do we get those employees back? And I just feel like here we don't, that's excusable on the basis that the state has a statute that says the school districts have to make that call in March, whether they like it or not. But we as a county are not required right now, before we have some additional information, to make that call. And I don't want to kick the can down the road, and I certainly know that I could be looked at as somebody who's in a relatively short-term position here. Obviously, I can make the decision either way based on all that information that I'm looking for. I can certainly make the decision either way. I'm not afraid to do that. We've done it before. We've done it if we have to do it. And I'm sort of setting aside for the moment. I'm sure the assessor's listening, restructuring type proposals like the one he's doing. As I think you can tell from the statements or the concerns that I'm expressing, that I'm talking about the macro picture, the same picture that Supervisor Wasserman was talking about in terms of where is this all headed and how are we going to deal with it? How will the county be dealing with it in, over a longer stretch of time? And is this sort of layoff option really going to get us there? So I guess that's an argument for trying to gather some more information as quickly as possible as to, at least those issue areas I brought up, property tax revenue and hospital structural deficit and where that's headed. I would not be inclined to support the layoffs today on this motion. I'm speaking to the motion, absent that information. That's what I'm really saying here. Thank you, President Chavez.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. I also won't be supporting the actions today for similar reasons, but really it was the earlier reason I talked about, which is I really want information so that I am knowledgeable, particularly as we're going to be looking at the $100 million and other investments, some that I want to make really badly, and I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing there. Supervisor Simidian?
Madam Chair, given the fact that there have been these requests for additional information, I'm curious what and both you and Supervisor Cortese have expressed concern about moving forward. I'm curious to hear what the county executive thinks about deferring action. We're, I believe, scheduled to take these matters up again in February. And we can have this conversation endlessly and about the uncertainty we're facing and how we deal with it. But I think the one thing all five of us could agree on is that we really are in sort of uncharted territory here, given the nature of the challenge. So, Dr. Smith, what's your take, if I may, through the chair before we go to a vote?
Of course.
Well, I guess what I would say is we're at a point where, we know there's a major deficit, and I would definitely recommend the board take action to deal with it. I think what we presented for you is relatively minimal in terms of layoffs, not minimal, obviously, for the people getting laid off, but it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get better. I think that I suppose there could be some compromises, but I guess what I would say is if we want to be 100% certain of everything, we will be 100% certain right as we go over the cliff, because there's not enough certainty in the world right now to give us 100%. And the options for layoffs that you're considering are relatively small compared to what you'll have to consider in June if we don't get further help. So, but if you want.
So, thank you. That's responsive. Let me, Madam Chair, if I may, and forgive my sort of reacting in real time. And I don't know if Supervisor Cortese wants to engage on this one or not, but I remember, I think he leaned in when I expressed concern previously about the government relations cut, which I know can seem a little distant, but as I read it, we're cutting 3 of the 4 people in our government relations department at precisely the time we need to be at the top of our game in dealing with both state and federal governments with respect to, what is not just millions, but hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. I fear it may be penny wise and pound foolish to trot out the old cliche. And, particularly as we're going into this period of uncertainty, I heard Dr. Smith say we could backfill some of the loss with contract lobbyists, but then, that really means the savings are not there, and we don't have someone who is focused on the county per se, but rather on individual areas where we need attention. I agree, but there isn't sort of somebody with a more comprehensive or holistic approach to county needs. So I guess what I would ask Dr. Smith is, and well, let me go first to Supervisor Cortese if he wants to weigh in. I thought I heard a similar concern the other day. I may have read more into a brief comment than I should have, but I particularly think as we're sending Supervisor Cortese off to Sacramento, who knows our county issues well and who's probably going to be somebody our county is turning to, leaving the current system in place for at least another year makes sense. So Supervisor Cortese, I was going to say I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I guess I'm not, since I specifically asked what you thought. So
no, I did. You heard me correctly. It was a brief comment. I just said that I echoed your concerns, I think, at the time, and I think one of the things that has to happen here going forward is whatever cuts are made, particularly to fill positions, have to be really, really strategic in terms of the reality that we're in. We've been talking about that all along, psychiatric versus not. There's some things that have been on the table in the past that just don't make as much sense right now to be on the table because of the pandemic, because of the world that we're in, the external world that we're in. So I agree with how you articulated, turning that one on its head. And we have sat together on this federal affairs task force. I can see, not everyone does. I could say that there's been a tremendous amount of value added there in having that dialogue going back and forth, and in fact, probably even part of it driving an agenda and keeping those folks busy, the lobbyists busy, working in the areas that we want them to work in to try to deliver for us. So, if anything, you'd want to be going in that direction.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Supervisor.
That's fine.
So, Dr. Smith, I think I'm going to go to the maker of the motion and the seconder and ask if you would incorporate a direction to withhold, if we're going to approve those reductions, to have them take effect no sooner than January 1st of 2022, which would mean that those positions remained untouched for the remainder of this year and next, which is at least the first year of the legislative session in Sacramento, which is a 2-year session, of course, and the first year of the new administration. And then as we get to the middle of the year and have our May, June budget hearings and workshops, we could revisit that item. But I do think, as I say, we're talking about what is literally, maybe, I don't know, $500,000 which then we're going to backfill with $200,000-300,000 probably in contract lobbyists if we go down this path. And, you know, all it takes is one multi-million-dollar miscue or missed opportunity or missed perception of a threat. And, you know, we're talking, you know, exponential multiples. So I should stop talking and see if I can take yes for an answer from my colleague, Supervisor Wasserman and Supervisor Ellenberg, through the chair with your permission, Madam President. And I'm sorry, you're still on mute, Madam President.
Thank you so much for helping me learn the route of Zoom. Supervisor Wasserman?
Thank you. Supervisor Smithian, are you saying for just those positions, wait until you did throw me off when you said 2022. I was startled.
I tell you what I'll do. I'll clarify that it's 3 positions, and I'll say December 31st of 2021. That'll make it sound like.
No, I don't need that. But you're saying 3 positions total out of the county proposal.
My understanding, and we can confirm this with Dr. Smith, is that there are essentially 4 positions in government relations, and the 3 of them are slated, and I don't think they're called out per se.
I understand. I just wanted the clarification from you that your friendly amendment is to approve the county exec's recommendation except for those 3 positions.
And actually, it would include those 3 positions, but defer any action until December 31st of 2021, so that we could revisit the issue if it seemed appropriate in our May-June budget hearings and workshops for the coming year's fiscal year's budget.
The deferral, through the chair, please. The deferral you're referring to is of those 3 positions. Otherwise, you're in favor of everything else in the county exec's recommendation before us today.
I wouldn't quite say in favor, but I would say I'm prepared to cast an aye vote. Yes.
Okay. Well, I've been in the business long enough to count to 3, and I made a motion, and 97% of something, my father said, it's always better than 100% of nothing.
Okay, so you're accepting that. And for the seconder of the motion, Supervisor Ellenberg?
I'll accept that.
Thank you. And Dr. Smith wanted to weigh in.
Yes.
No, I just wanted to be clear that we were talking about just those 3 positions.
Yes.
Sorry, I forgot to lower my hand when I
Oh,
cut
no
my
problem.
answer.
I just wanted to, for clarity, just for those positions, I wanted to ask and Dr. Smith, this may be something to ask you, is whether or not those positions, given the restructure that Supervisor Simidian is raising, whether or not they could still be included in the VSIP if they, especially given that they know there's an end date to their jobs. And Supervisor Simidian, that would also be a question, I think, first for you in your motion.
My understanding is that one of the 3 positions is an unclassified position and therefore does not qualify for that opportunity, and that the other 2 positions are classified and would qualify for that opportunity. And presumably they could take that action if they thought they saw the handwriting on the wall.
I just wanted to see if that still stayed in place as an option for them, and if you were comfortable with that being in place as an option for them.
I think it does, and I certainly am comfortable with it staying in place for them as well.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Is that feasible?
Yes, Supervisor Simidian's assessment is correct.
All right, thank you. All right, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any more discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote.
Supervisor Ellenberg.
Yes.
Supervisor Simidian.
Yes.
Supervisor Cortese.
No.
Vice President Wasserman.
Yes.
And President Chavez.
No. All right, so 3-2, and we will see everybody bright-eyed and bushy-tailed on Friday. at our last meeting on the budget, or not the budget, our special board meeting. All right, thanks
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you.